And of course it will be probably 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Welcome to Behind the Pages. Cheryl Suchors is with us today. Cheryl became a hiker in her late 40s. She successfully has climbed a lot of mountains, and she wrote a book that details her journey from a beginner hiker to climbing more than 48 peaks in New Hampshire. Cheryl, welcome on the show. The name of your book is 48 Peaks. Is that correct?
Hiking and healing in the White Mountains.
All right. So why 48 Peaks? Do you want to tell us about this thing that I guess hikers know about, but not everyone else does?
Sure. Well, the Appalachian Mountain Club has a subset group of volunteers that run something called the 4,000 Footer Club. And anybody can join the 4,000 Footer Club after, and only after, you've hiked all 48 of the mountains in the White Mountains that are 4,000 feet or higher. And they can't just be 4,000 feet because some of the peaks that you hike are over 4,000 feet, but they don't meet all of the criterion. So there's a list of 48, and I just got inspired to do the 48.
So at what point, tell us about your first hike, because at that point you didn't know that you were going to want to do this.
No, I didn't. I had never heard of a 4,000 footer or the 4,000 Footer Club.
Yeah.
I had chosen to hike Mount Tri-Pyramid because I was in the midst of a late mid-career transition, and I had stopped being in the world of business where I knew what I was doing to try my hand at writing a novel. And I had thought it would be a bit of a slam dunk, honestly, only because in the business world, my colleagues thought I was a good writer, and I thought, well, if I'm not doing anything else, how hard can this be? Whoa, totally eye-opening.
Yeah.
Quickly became the hardest job I'd ever had. And it left me at age 48 staring down 50, feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know. And I was used to feeling successful, so I thought, well, maybe something physical and concrete, something that's really hard for me, so that if I do it, I will feel like I've had some success in my life, which I was really looking for at that time, a sense of mastery or control over something, anything. And so I went with 2 friends of mine. One, Kate, who was my best friend, next door neighbor, my daughter's Auntie Kate, my dog's Auntie Kate, and now my training partner and hiking buddy. And I also, and she was 6 years older than I, so she was 54 at the time. And then I invited my best friend from college, Sarah, and together we started out on this 12-mile hike, which was so much longer than I had ever hiked back in the day, on much easier trails. And it had a lot of elevation gain, 3,000 feet. And I understood that meant, you know, like we'd start out here and at the top of the mountain we'd be 3,000 feet higher. But I had no clue what that would feel like, you know, in the body.
Right.
And so now I tell folks who aren't familiar with this concept, it's a little bit like a house. So if you picture a 2-story house with an attic, and then another one just like it, and you pick up the second one and put it on the first one, you have to add up 100 houses to equal 3,000 feet of elevation gain.
And you're not going just straight up. It's up, down, right?
Yes.
So you're actually climbing more than that in a way.
In a way, and also very rocky, rooty, knee-busting trails. So it was a huge challenge, and we were so astounded we did it. It was wonderful. It was a great feeling of success afterward.
Mm-hmm. Your book opens with a prologue, and at that point, I think it had been 4 years since that first hike. You're climbing the mountain, a mountain with your friend Sarah, and it's clear that you're bringing the ashes of your friend with you, and you needed to pick a mountain that you felt would be the right place for her. What did you pick and why?
I picked Mount Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Kate had really liked views, and so I knew I wanted a mountain with a lot of views. I was too weak myself at that point. I wasn't strong enough to do Mount Washington. And I initially thought of doing Mount Eisenhower because it had a 360-degree panorama. But then I realized, oh no, Kate would never forgive me for leaving her on a mountain named after a Republican. So I switched. I switched to Mount Monroe. And it was in the presidential range, which is the sort of grandest of the grand and the tallest also of the 4,000 footers. And she and I had not gotten to break into that range together. And I knew that the first time I did it, I kind of wanted her to be with me. So for all those reasons, Mount Monroe seemed like a good choice.
You also talked about the that hike, which was, again, 4 years after your first one, with others in between. And as you start mounting and getting to the heights, you mentioned your sort of fear of falling and fear of heights. At what point on any hike does that kind of go away for you?
Well, it depends a lot on the hike. I'll tell you. I do much better if many of the hikes start out in forest, so it's really kind of not an issue for a while. What is most troubling for me is open ledges where there aren't things I can, hang on to, and especially coming down, where I have to look down. That's very troubling. So I have learned to put people who are taller than me in front of me. So that I just kind of follow their backs, and I can't see over their heads, so I can't see the trail below me, and that helps a lot. Yeah.
So it sounds like essentially once you're down at the bottom, you're not afraid anymore.
No, I'm definitely not. It's definitely the heights that get me.
And is it still to this day, or was that just, in the earlier days?
It's still true. I got more accomplished and therefore a little more comfortable on some ledges and things like that. But there are plenty of times, even now, where it can start to trigger that vertigo feeling, and I just have to be really careful not to stop. Stopping is death. Because it's very hard for me to get going again.
So that's a better strategy, even if you're tired, then, rather than keep stopping, just keep going, but go slower. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. For me, it is, and also, as a hiker, you build up a rhythm, and it's. Well, I suppose it's like anything, right? It's much harder to start something than it is to kind of keep moving once you're in a bit of a groove. And to start and stop and start and stop is, I find, much more difficult.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine, too, that hiking is like other sports, that strategies that work for one person might not work for the next. So the better thing to do is to figure out your own, what works best for you. And is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Although I have to say, at a reading I gave the other night, one woman in the audience raised her hand and she said, I want to know how you deal with fear of heights, because I'm afraid of heights too. So, I gave her my strategies.
Oh, sure. Not to say not to give them, but I mean, yes, right.
Hopefully they'll help her too. But as you say, you never know. We're all so idiosyncratic.
Right, we are, So can you tell us about this decision that you did make to start doing the 48 peaks?
Well, my first reaction to it was, what a nutty thing to do. This is lunatic.
Who would want to do that? Kind of
Right.
thing? Yeah.
I mean, 48 mountains, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
And then when you join the 4,000 footer club, you know, what do you get? Well, you get a little patch. You know? And somehow that didn't seem, at the time, commensurate with the effort. But I have to say...
And you sort of heard about it by chance on that first hike, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were on Mount Tri-Pyramid. We were about halfway through. We'd been hiking for over 5 hours. And there were 3 guys when we got to our second summit, which is called Middle Peak. And one of them asked if we were peak bagging. And I don't know, are we?
Yeah, what is it?
And so he told us about the 4,000 footer club and so forth. And so as I say, I thought it was kind of possibly a demented thing to do.
But of course, you want to mention too that you were in the middle of a very hard hike, your very first one.
Yes.
So the idea of doing any more of it at that particular moment might not have seemed very appealing.
So true. But then after it was over, you know, and Kate and I were so proud of ourselves. You know, we just felt so strong. And I thought, well, you know, we've already got 2 under our belts now. I mean, 3 did not count, which did seem eminently unfair to us, but only two of the 3 peaks counted. But
yes,
so
because that particular mountain went up, down, right? I mean, sort of.
There has to be 200 feet of elevation gain or loss between 2 peaks, 2 neighboring peaks, for the second one to count. So, anyway, it just. I liked it because it gave me a whole list of things that could provide concrete victories, if you will, you know, and a sense of mastery as I was fumbling around trying to learn the skills of being a writer. Yeah.
And how did you find that affected your ability to write, doing this hiking or taking that on?
Well, it both fed my writing career and also, of course, took time away from it.
Right.
Because I was a so-called 3-season hiker, which in the whites typically means May through October. And even in early October, like on Tri-Pyramid, it was 32 degrees when we started, and we were finding icicles along the way. So I liked the idea that there were things that I didn't have to go out and discover. There was a list of them, and I could choose from amongst them, and it would help me create energy for writing, if you will. And once I started connecting to nature and plugging into the natural world as I hiked, it fed this inner reservoir that is talked about in that wonderful book, what is it, The Artist's Way. And she says, Julia Cameron says, you know, you can't just always be taking out from that reservoir. You have to put back in sometimes. And for me, hiking was a way to refill that energy reserve so that I could go back to the book. And so took time away, but also kept me going, if you will.
Right, because writing isn't always something that time helps. Sometimes too much time can be a bit intimidating too, I think, too. So, yeah. And there's something about physical exercise, I think, too, that kind of clears the brain a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, and I was reading about a study the other day where even in a city where they had a control group of people who were told to walk through an arboretum, and they tested their brain waves before and after. And then they gave a second group, did the same test, but asked them to talk on their cell phones while they were walking around. So they got the exact same amount of exercise, and therefore endorphins. But the group that wasn't talking on their cell phone, their brains had rested.
Mm.
So exactly what you say, it's,
Yes.
it's very calming and soothing and nurturing, really, I think, for our
And
brains.
I would think hikers would not be putting headphones on, or would they?
Some
Seems-
do,
really?
depending on the trail. I mean, if you're hiking alone,
Yeah.
I never did it, but
Yeah.
I know some folks who do and find it very rewarding. For me, it makes it more difficult for me to connect into that web of life feeling
Yeah.
that I love so.
Mm-hmm. So you did say that you started this because it was sort of aiding your writing, but you also said that you felt this need to succeed at something because you didn't feel like you were succeeding as a writer the way you thought you would. Do you want to tell us about that a little bit more?
Well, there I was thinking, I'm kind of staring down age 50, and surely a woman should know by that age what she's doing. And I was really struggling with the writing, and I felt like a very untalented, possibly unskilled baby novelist at a not so tender age. And it was hard to develop the patience to allow myself to grow into becoming a writer. And I've heard other authors talk about how it takes 15 years to make a writer. Well, I didn't know that either.
Right, it's a good thing.
Right. But yeah, the physical just really helped me, because I felt like I was flubbing my dream. I had wanted to write a novel since I was a child.
Yeah.
I had loved books. They were, my most constant friends in a childhood of moving around many schools, many high schools, different places, that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to write one of these wonderful things one day. So I should have been following my bliss, but I kind of wasn't, and it made me feel bad.
Yeah. No, it's hard, and it's hard to break into a new field when you're older too, and you've been really good at something else before that, because you were in the business world before that, weren't you?
Yes, I was, and
Yeah.
I was used to people asking my advice.
Yeah.
I was used to having an opinion about things, and I just found that my business experience just really got in the way of writing fiction.
Yeah.
So I had to unlearn a lot of things before I could take in and learn the new.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge.
Right. So yeah, I guess climbing a mountain at least you started in the morning and you hopefully finish it at the end of the day. You're done, success. You've produced a mountain.
Exactly, and there was no debate or dispute about it. I've done it.
Yeah.
And there was nothing about, well, was it good enough?
Yeah.
Would
Right.
somebody else have liked that hike if they had watched me do it? Would they have published that hike?
Yes, right. None of that.
None of that.
Yeah, I remember you talk at one point about, you talk in quite a bit of detail about that first hike, which was interesting to read about. And at one point in it, you talked about how you didn't really know if you could finish, and all of a sudden just got so mad you just kept putting one foot in front of the other. Like anger really powered you up some of those last peaks.
Yes.
Do you still find that emotion helpful when you're climbing?
That's a good question. I can't recall the last time I got angry when I was hiking. No, I don't. I guess I've learned better that mastery isn't really what one looks for on a hike. At least I don't. It's not about that.
Right.
And you don't control the weather. You don't control the trail. There's a lot that I was looking for in my life that I thought hiking could give me, and hiking taught me, no, mastery isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and control is often an illusion, and you better just deal.
Right. And success, is something you can define yourself, because some people would say they have to climb it in a certain amount of time. Other people would say, I just want to do it, however long it takes, and I think it's part of like whatever goal you set is sort of a goal that would work for you too, not just necessarily one that you could achieve, but one that makes you feel good.
Well, and that, of course, you know this right away. I didn't know that right away.
Yeah.
I was sort of like, well, those guys who wrote the hiking Bible, the White Mountain Guide, they say it should take 7 hours. It should take 7 hours, and what's wrong with me that it took me 10 hours? And then as I went along, I realized that when I did hike in book time, as it's called, I didn't enjoy the hike nearly so well as when I could stop and look at all the wildflowers or examine a toad or watch a snake, kind of wiggle its way along, or just get into the lichen or the bark on the trees. I mean, it was a whole different experience for me. So I did have to redefine what success meant for me, and it was much more along the lines of what you say. It was more what fulfilled me and made me feel like I really enjoyed what I was doing, because it was always hard. I mean,
right.
It was rarely not hard.
So. Were you athletic before you started hiking?
I tried to be. I had a bit of a checkered career with sports. I had loved tennis, and I played tennis. My husband and I played tennis together until I somehow trashed my elbow and had to have surgery for tennis elbow. And I thought, okay, I won't play that again. Well, I'll go running, because everybody was jogging at that point. And then after several years of that, my feet kind of gave out. So I had to find something else. So I went to swimming, which was wonderful until I had to have shoulder surgery. So I was down to not many body parts left by the time I got to hiking. And I was older, and I realized I better figure this out. So my body just needs a lot of help, I need acupuncture and massage and all those things that keep me going, because otherwise I get injured. It's just that simple.
And you have had injuries with hiking too.
Yes, a number of them.
I remember you were describing one hike where you fell and broke your wrist.
Yes,
that put you back for a while, didn't it?
It did, yeah. It was very hard because I couldn't use hiking poles. I couldn't put any weight on my hand.
Right.
But nonetheless, somehow, I just couldn't give it up. And fortunately, I haven't injured myself in quite a while now. So
good. Well, we'll keep it that way. That's right. But I mean, this is a big accomplishment because you also had some illness along the way too. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Well, in the year 2000, so let's see, we had started in 1998, and by the year 2000, I had climbed 5 of the 4,000 footers. 4 of them with my friend Kate, and 2 on Tri-Pyramid with Kate and Sarah, and 1 by myself. And that spring, that January actually, my friend Kate was diagnosed very early on in the new millennium with ovarian cancer. And that was just so shocking. And she immediately she had surgery, then she had started 7 months of chemotherapy. And so I was very much trying to help her through that. But in March of 2000, I was diagnosed with invasive breast cancer. So I had to have my own surgeries, and then did my rounds of chemotherapy, and started a 5-year course of tamoxifen. And I was just one of those people that had lots of side effects, and they tended to last. I mean, I still have some side effects from chemotherapy. And it was it was another mountain, I will say that. It was
Yeah.
it was one of the hardest
Yeah.
to kind of, I felt like rather than going up, I felt like I was going down into the
Yeah.
abyss, and then I had to kind of
And you knew what you had
claw
to
my
climb
way
after.
back up
Yeah.
again. But that was 18 years ago,
Yeah.
and I'm still cancer-free.
Oh,
So
congratulations. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
There's hope for other women. This is why I tell that story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have just a few minutes left, but I did want you to tell us a little bit about your decision to write this particular book. What did you feel like you wanted to communicate to your readers?
I started off actually writing a how-to hiking book for beginners.
Okay.
But my writers group quickly dissuaded me that the more interesting bits were the ones about my family and what I was feeling and thinking as I was going along. So it then turned into a memoir, and I got the idea, I guess I had hiked about 11 of the 4,000 footers, and I really didn't quite know where it would go, but I was hoping to write something that would inspire people to spend more time out in nature, because we're just made for that connection,
Wow.
and that it would help anyone with illness.
So
too.
that's great. Well, we certainly appreciate your being here on the show with us today.
Oh, thank you,
Unfortunately, at this
Diane.
point, we are out of time. To our viewers, you've been watching Behind the Pages. From the staff of 22 City View, I'm Diane Goshgarian. Thank you for being with us. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was
Thank you very much.
a very inspiring, story, because, like I said, this is one that it wasn't a steady climb,